Hello, everybody, and welcome to Heartlight Vedic Astrology. Today, I was going to discuss Venus and Jupiter combustion as it relates to Muhurta. Muhurta is auspicious timing election in Vedic astrology or Jyotish. So let's get into it. Okay, so what is Muhurta? If you haven't heard about it, it's also known as electional astrology. And it's essentially what this means is choosing an auspicious time to begin a new activity as it relates to position and condition of stars and planets and that sort of thing. So you can kind of think about it as trying to align with the best energy of the stars and nature. Yeah, getting in the right flow and getting the support of the universe, really. Okay, now the thing is that um, with Muhurta, you can only extend to the extent that you can exert your free will. Okay, so this gets into kind of the philosophy of Jyotish or Vedic astrology is that there's different kinds of karmas, okay, or kind of action, reaction things that happen. And so one type of karma is agama karma, and this is where your intentions, so having, for example, good intentions, will help build good karma in terms of a good outcome. Okay. So if you're interested in learning about the different types of karma and how they relate to Vedic astrology, I have a whole video on types of karma. Okay, so you can check that out. But I'm just mentioning this because again, some people really put a lot of emphasis on Muhurta. And the thing is that yes, to some extent, through free will, you can choose or look for an auspicious time to begin an activity. But the thing is, you have to remember that you can only alter the outcome so much depending on what's in the natal chart. Okay. So if there's a lot of what we would call dread karma or fixed karma, like if you have all these planets that indicate that you're going to have a lot of children, then you will have a lot of children. Or the opposite, if you have certain placements and of planets and condition of planets that says it's unlikely you will have children, then it may be very difficult for somebody to have children. Okay. Um, but again, that's if it's really extreme, fixed, one way or the other. A lot of people will have kind of a mixed, karma. And so it's sort of like, depending on karmas that you create, right, through the things that you think and the things that you say and the things that you do, that can open up the field more or, So anyway, it's a little bit of a background. So the thing is today, though, I was going to talk about how does Muhurta, so electional astrology, choosing an auspicious time to start a new activity, relate to Venus and or Jupiter combustion? Okay, so Venus is Shukra in Sanskrit, and Jupiter is Guru, and Asta means combustion. Okay, so why am I even thinking about this? Well, actually, currently, we are heading into Venus combustion. Okay, and that's going to be going on from April 28th through July 10th of this year, 2024 is the time of this recording. And Jupiter is also going into combustion May 3rd, and that will be combust until June 2nd. So it's kind of an unusual phenomenon to have both of these planets combust at the same time. So you can see we're going to have a good 1 month overlap. And so the thing is uh, let me back up a little bit. So when you have a planet in combustion, okay, technically what that means is the planet is so close to the sun that essentially the sun's light eclipses that planet. So you can't see it in the sky anymore, like at night. Okay. So when you have a planet that's combust, then the symbolism of that planet, the outward symbolism of that planet, is typically not seen as much in the 3D world, right? In your material world. So, for example, Venus represents things like sociability and compassion and um, the finer things of life and social grace, that sort of thing. And Jupiter represents things like children and education, teaching, learning, and spirituality. And so, it just so happens, which is probably not surprising if you do astrology, is that right now in the United States, we have a lot of universities where students are protesting the war going on in the Middle East. Um, and so you actually have On campuses, students are camping out and protesting quite loudly, potentially violently. There's a lot of arrests going on. Some of the universities are actually canceling graduation, which is supposed to be, a lot of graduations happen this time of year, or, mid to end May or beginning of June. They're canceling classes and moving classes to online because this situation's getting very disruptive and potentially violent. So that's all Venus Jupiter combustion. So we're already getting signs of this. Yeah. And I've mentioned in a couple of my previous videos that the last time Venus was combust, that I distinctly recall, was a few summers ago. And at that time, it was kind of a similar situation, but a little bit different. Jupiter was not combust at that time, just Venus, but we had protesting going on in the United States for Black Lives Matter, which is, fine and good um, thing. But the way that it was done was that, people were burning cars in the street, they were looting stores, and so innocent, innocent people, their property and things were, their lives were getting disrupted because there was a lack of social harmony, there was social disruption. And there was, lack of compassion and a lot of angry words and things like that. Okay. So the thing is that, now we're going to have Venus and Jupiter both combust at the same time. So I got to thinking about Muhurta, uh, what would potentially be a good activity to engage in during this time or not. Okay. So if you're interested in learning more about the symbolism of Venus and Jupiter, I have individual videos on each planet and their symbolism, and you can find all of that in my Planets and Grahas playlist. I'm all about playlists. I always organize my videos and playlists so that they're easier to find. And then the other thing is that if you want to learn more about the specifics of combustion or Asta, as it's known as in Sanskrit, and the indications or significance of that and the technical pieces of that, I have a video on planet combustion or Asta, so you can check that out. But there is actually classical literature on activities that are typically done or not done during such periods as Venus and or Jupiter combustion. So let's take a look at what those things are. Okay, so now the information I'm presenting here, again, it's from classical literature. And the thing is that the information presented here is for if either Venus or Jupiter is combust. Okay, and again, this in a few days, actually, even now, you can see here, we're starting to feel the effects of this when they're both going to be combust. So I think May is going to be a pretty tough month because Venus and Jupiter are the two great benefic planets. They're the ones that consistently bring the most positive energy, generally speaking, of grace and compassion and generosity and spirituality, that sort of thing. Okay, so when we're talking about Muhurta, and I'm going to go through the list of activities here. You also want to think about. I gave the specific dates on when Venus and Jupiter will be combust this next month. But the thing is, those aren't exactly like hard starts and stops. So you want to think about like even 3 days before and after. So right now we're in this 3 days before Venus goes combust. Okay, so you can actually see things getting worse on campuses, like canceling graduations and stuff like that in the United States right now. Okay. Now the other thing is that these lists are, from classical, literature. So a lot of the language and the context may not be applicable, especially if you don't live in an Indian culture. So you want to consider what are the modern or cultural equivalents to what is listed here in Shastra, which are the classic texts. Okay. So keep that all in mind. And again, this is Venus or Jupiter combustion I'm listing here. It doesn't specifically mention Jupiter and Venus at the same time, but you can imagine that there's a doubling up effect here. Okay. So the first kind of category is like things related to home and land. So typically during Venus or Jupiter combustion, it is not an auspicious time to begin construction of or entering a new house or home. Okay, because again, if you don't have the great benefics manifesting their energy, benefits, beneficial energy outwardly, then you could see where, something that's supposed to be a main dwelling of self and family potentially, and a place to rest, and spend most of your days, most of your time. If those two planets aren't, again, if those two planets are eclipsed, then you can imagine that there would be difficulties, here. So you wouldn't necessarily have a lot of peace or good relationships potentially. Okay. So also related to home and land, digging of wells and ponds and tanks, that sort of thing. Okay, so again, these are long-standing structures, and also garden laying. Um, that's on the list as well. And you can imagine too that again, garden that's usually a long-term kind of activity, and gardening, whether it's food or plants or flowers or whatever. Most of those things are related to Venus because Venus symbolizes the finer things of life. Okay. Then we have the next category is travel. Okay, and Venus represents travel. Jupiter can also represent travel. And so traveling, the first visit to a holy place. So, like if you wanted to go to Mecca or um, Lourdes or something like that for the first time. Again, we're talking about the first time only. So if it's a repeat visit, then that might be okay. But a first visit to a holy place is generally not considered auspicious, especially because, again, Jupiter is considered to be a spiritual planet. Okay, and also the planet of like the guru, the teacher, the spiritual teacher. Okay, also travel the first visit to a foreign country. So again, if it's a repeat visit, better, but a first visit to a foreign country, not necessarily the best time during Venus or Jupiter combustion. Okay. Then leadership, it's kind of a funny category here, but actually coronation. So the installing of a new head of state. This is not the best time because again, these planets, Venus and Jupiter, um, again, we're talking about social grace, we're talking about compassion, that sort of thing. So you can imagine that if somebody was put into, head of state position during this time, that things would not go well. They might even be a dictator, or become a dictator, or kind of a malevolent figure who creates a lot of damage more than something good. And also, first meeting with a king or other high dignitary, it's generally not the best time, because again, that's the beginning of a more, usually a beginning of a strong relationship there, or at least potentially strong relationship, but it may not be a strong or beneficial relationship if Venus or Jupiter are composed. Okay. You can see President Biden of the United States here. This is his first meeting with King Charles III of the United Kingdom. So what else? Okay, so other activities potentially to be avoided during Venus or Jupiter combustion, 3 days before or after. Um, in Indian culture, there are known as the 16 samskaras, and these are sacraments or rites of passage. So again, this is very specific to Indian culture, and you want to consider what are modern or different cultural ethnic equivalents to these sorts of things. But there are 16 of these, and they are different kind of almost ceremonies you can think of too, rites of passage that happen from actually prenatal time even up throughout one's life cycle. But some of them are kind of prenatal infant samskaras, and those are okay to do unless you're performing them because of a delay, like you're trying to do them again. Um, and then after the seventh samskara is Anna, and that's a rice feeding ceremony. That's the first time you give like solid food to a child once they're like starting to wean off breastfeeding and that sort of thing. So that's the seventh samskara. So after that, the following 8 through 16 are activities you would not necessarily want to do during Venus and Jupiter combustion. Okay, so I'll just go through them in case you're not familiar. So again, you can kind of think to yourself like what are the equivalents where you are in your life, that sort of thing. So the eighth samskara is chuda karana, and that's like haircutting, first haircut. So part of the reason why this is important is that you're kind of creating a personality. There's also kind of good luck, and so in terms of sociability, and also sort of general thoughts of like hygiene and cleanliness, because generally, like a cleaner person would have a brighter personality, more luck, because they're staying clean, both externally, potentially, and internally. And staying clean would create better karma. Okay. Then the ninth samskara is Karna Veda, which is ear piercing. And this is related to health in many ways. There's actually a marma point there. Marma is like acupressure, but it's from traditional Indian medicine. And so there's certain indications for health related to the earlobe. Then the 10th samskara, this is either called Akshar or Vidya Aramba, and this is the starting of education, like literally when somebody's starting to learn their ABCs or the equivalent of that. So, like the first time you introduce a child to the letters of the alphabet, whatever your equivalent is in your culture, or maybe the numbers, one, two, three, that sort of thing. Because again, that's a starting of a relationship between the child and education and having a clear mind and wisdom to move through life. And the 11th samskara is Upnayana. This is a thread ceremony. So typically when somebody is starting a educational program, they tie threads around the student's wrist, and that relates to what was it, debt to parents, a debt to guru or teacher, and also debt to God. Okay, but essentially it's kind of that stage where, and I think there are equivalents in other cultures where, usually about 6 or 7 or so, the student or the child is becoming a little bit more self-aware and self-contained. And so now they're kind of moving into a new status of being a student, but also like a productive member of society, or at least the start of that. And they're starting to learn like, good and bad and, morality and that sort of thing. So I think a lot of cultures, like in their age range of 5 through 6, 7, 8, have some version of this. Yeah. Then the 12th samskara is Veda Aramba, and this is the beginning to learn the Vedas. So again, if you're in a different culture, like maybe it's learning the Quran or maybe it's learning the Torah or something like that. Like a bar mitzvah, bas mitzvah, that sort of thing. Um, it's some equivalent to that, where again, it's not just knowledge, like practical knowledge, mundane knowledge, like ABCs and one, two, three, and arithmetic and all that sort of thing. But we're talking about spiritual knowledge here. So this is about um, starting some activity that relates to um, spiritual knowledge and wisdom. And again, using that spiritual knowledge or wisdom in positive ways to be an upstanding member of society and again create positive karma for the person as well as the people around them. Then the 13th samskara is either Keshanta or Ritu Suddhi. Keshanta is the male equivalent and Ritu Suddhi is the female equivalent. So for guys, this is the first shave of facial hair. And for women, this is their first menstruation. So typically this happens around the age of 16 or so. Um, and so this is the kind of rite of passage into, adulthood in terms of like sexuality, first signs of, more mature sexuality. Okay. Then the 14th samskara is Samavartana. And this is typically like a holy bath that's taken after one's completed their education. So it's after graduation. So, age 16 through 18 typically. Okay. So this is also important because not only has one completed the education, and so you're kind of like supposedly, hopefully, a master of that education. But the other thing is that that's also, at least in Indian culture, makes you marriage ready. Okay. So after you finish your education, then you can proceed to marriage. Okay. Then the 15th samskara is vivaha, which is marriage. And the 16th samskara is antyeshti, which is cremation. Okay. So again, during Venus and Jupiter combustion, number 8 through 16 is generally not advised. Now, some of these things can't be avoided, typically. Like, I don't know how it's handled, like Antyeshti cremation. Like, if Venus is combust for, like, it's going to be combust now for 2.5 months, I don't know how they handle, just the bodies in India, especially since a lot of parts of India are quite warm. Um, so I don't know how that's handled exactly, but even that's the thing is like even during Venus and Jupiter combustion, that's one thing to keep in mind is that there's certain activities you can try to find within this, inauspicious time based on the or Jupiter combustion, times are a little bit better. So it might be best to avoid these things, but again, some of these things can't be avoided. So then you would, especially during Venus and Jupiter combustion, you'd have to dig pretty deep to find, the other star alignments and planet alignments and moon and sun alignments and things like that that would bring more auspiciousness because this Venus and Jupiter combustion is just one note in the whole, pantheon of Muhurta decisions that can be made. So keep that in mind. And then the last piece here is spiritual practices. So again, you can imagine that Venus and Jupiter, especially because Jupiter is the guru, right, the spiritual teacher here, but Venus and Jupiter are both about compassion. They're both spiritual planets. Venus is a little bit more of a mundane, worldly, getting along with people, especially when, people are not necessarily nice to you or pleasant with you. How do you shift that energy to something more pleasant and generally, beneficial for all involved? That's kind of the idea of somebody who's got a very strong Venus or a very strong Venusian time. Okay, so spiritual practices, and again, this is based on traditional Indian culture. Starting or ending a fast or vows, generally not an auspicious time. Also, the 10 Mahadanas, Maha is great, and Dana is like money or donations. So traditionally or in classical texts, there are 10 of these. So you can see from the language here that this is, fairly old. Some of it, again, you have to think about what's the modern or cultural, equivalent of this. But the 10 Mahadanas are gold, so something very valuable. Horses, again, in traditional society, you know, um, very valuable. Naga, I don't exactly know what this is. So, Naga translated as a snake, and I'm wondering if I don't know if snakes were literally given as a gift. Maybe, maybe not. But what I'm thinking is maybe a statue of a snake because the snake deity was actually worshipped quite a bit, or is worshipped quite a bit in some parts. And the snake represents, life force. It also represents transformation, spirituality, that sort of thing. So I'm not exactly sure what the how the Naga form manifests now or in the past, but it's on the list of classical literature. Also, maidservants, giving people help. Vehicles of all kinds, land, houses. Kanyadana. Kanyadana is like a bride. You translate that as a bride. So somebody giving somebody away for marriage. Cow, again, you can imagine like that's a different form of wealth. And then tilapatra, which is a plate of sesame seeds, which is a typical offering in a temple. So you can see this is not the greatest time because again, even though there might be positive intent behind this, um, it would be a little bit tainted because of the Venus and or Jupiter are combust. Um, so again, I don't know how this works practical way. If it's better not to do, maybe it's better to do something like mantra if you're going to do an offering. Do something internal um, like that instead of the wealth giving. Because again, Venus and Jupiter are all about wealth, and so if you're trying to give somebody it's almost like giving somebody a house or a vehicle and the car is like a lemon and has all these problems, or the house is a money pit and it just falls apart or gets, blown away in a tornado or something like that. That's what I'm imagining. So the wealth that you're giving will actually be not as auspicious for you or the person receiving. Then there's Soma Yagna. This is a yajna, so it's a ritual or observance or oblation performed during the lunar cycle for, again, auspicious reasons. Then there's Prana Prashtishta. This is like installing a divine vessel in a temple. So any kind of major installation or religious installation, probably not a good idea. Then there's Diksha. Diksha is like receiving a mantra from your guru or spiritual teacher. So again, it may not be as auspicious as you might think if it happens during this time. And again, this is another rite of initiation into more formal kind of, especially Brahmin type of path, Brahmin path for professional, really more professional reasons, but also spiritual reasons, is becoming more of a priestly figure or spiritual teacher yourself. And then there's Havana, which is a fire oblation. So again, another type of ritual or sacrificial ritual um, to invoke more goodness, more auspiciousness. But again, during this time, it's not generally advised. Okay, so take this information as you will. And again, I'm just reporting here from the classical text so that you're aware and you have this information and can use it as you wish. So, as always, I want to thank you for your time. I always appreciate you stopping by and listening to one of my talks. All of my teaching videos on the subject of Vedic astrology are in my concepts playlist. They can all be found there. I also have a birth charts archive list 2024 video that I published not too long ago. In that video, I list all the birth charts of famous people, places, and moments in time, and the video that you can find them in, because they're not, most of them are not one-off videos where you can tell from the title the birth charts that I've gone through. So if you're looking for birth charts to kind of look at or study, I would look at that video as a directory. Um, if you're interested in individual birth chart readings, I offer those live on Zoom or as a recorded video. If that's of interest, you can email heartlightastra@yahoo.com. I do have another YouTube channel on natural medicine that includes other Vedic arts such as Ayurveda and yoga, traditional Indian medicine and yoga, as well as other paradigms of natural medicine such as homeopathy and naturopathic medicine. And then the name of that channel is Nature Source Care. So that's out there too if that's interesting or helpful to you. So as always, I hope this video was interesting, helpful, and useful to you as you learn to navigate the energy cycles of your own life. All right. So until the next one, take care. Namaste.